And we're live. So hello, so I've got Cliff with me today, and we're going to speak about everything today. We're going to speak about the coronavirus, the immune system, and how to help really. So I want to just introduce Cliff, and Cliff actually helped me massively last year. I had a few issues going off with my gut, I had a few issues going off with my blood sugar levels, and Cliff helped me out massively. But I just want to let you jump in, Cliff, and just explain to everybody who you are and what you do, and how much of a wizard you are.
Yeah, wizard. I hear that. So, you know, as Danny introduced me, I'm Cliff, and the reason I got into this is probably the most important thing of why people should listen, I suppose, in some respects. I was born with a 6 to 4 degrees scoliosis and kyphosis in my spine. So it means it goes to the left and then also backwards. And I had a double fusion of my spine. So by the age of 3 years of age, I'd had 3 major operations in my spine. Then when I was 15, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, ulcerative colitis. And then 17, a brain tumor. 18, I got meningitis as a result of the way the operation was done with the brain tumor. And then I spent really from my early 20s just becoming a bit of an investigator, which I suppose, like you said, Lynn, has moved up to wizard status 10, 11 years later. But that's really it. I just became an investigator for all the answers I wasn't getting. And that was a tricky thing because, you know, when you're told, you know, unequivocally by conventional medicine that there's no way out of this, there's medication or surgery or whatever it might be in your circumstance, you know, I wasn't so happy with that outcome. So, you know, I'm now in my 11th year, symptom medication free, for an autoimmune disease. I don't have any issues, don't take any medications or anything like this. And now we help high performers essentially do the same.
Nice. I think you're in a pretty good place to talk about this virus then right now.
Well, I think the most important thing that I'm seeing the misinformation around is the difference between what's a bacteria and what's a virus.
Okay. That straight away. Let's go into, I mean, what is the big deal about this virus and what is all the misinformation out there?
So one thing is you're not seeing it as much anymore, it's been slowly corrected, but when they originally were talking about it, and you're seeing a lot of misinformation on the internet about herbs and different things that could help with the virus. And don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of alternate medicines, all this kind of stuff. They can be super useful, but in context. And so what we're seeing at this moment in time is people are talking about things that would treat bacteria. So a bacteria, very simply, is a living thing, okay? As where a virus isn't. So a virus is like a part of DNA, really, part of genetics, material, and it injects itself into a cell. And so the cell becomes infected. That's essentially what happens. Bacteria works ever so slightly differently. It can be in a cell, extra, outside the cell. So what we're seeing at the moment is people sharing a lot of things around supplements that are antibacterial, not antiviral. And so that's part of the misinformation. And plus, you know, like I always say, if you're going to be able to clear a virus, there's a few things you have to do. You know, you guys do it perfectly because you're getting people to move their body, right? So, and getting them to train. So if you think the lymphatic system is pretty much one of the primary ways you're going to deal with viral loads.
Yeah.
So basically the virus will, I'll break it down. So when the virus gets exposed to you, your first line of defense really for a virus is your tonsils. Okay. Because your tonsils have like immune cells and other things that can act as filters. So if you don't have your tonsils anymore, you kind of lose that line of defense, which many people don't. And then we have something called MALT, which is mucosa associated lymphoid tissue. Yep. And you have that in your gut, you have that in your lungs. And this is where the virus is really specific at the moment with lungs. So what happens is that when the virus gets into the lungs, what should happen is this MALT, this essentially think of it as a layer, a very thin layer. This layer should be able to raise the alarm, which are certain cells of your immune system, your B cells. And then your T cells then are the soldiers, essentially come wipe it out. You will then pass it through your lymphatic system. And that's why when you get infections, your lymphatic nodes get swollen.
Yeah.
Right? Because things get passed from the lymphatic system to various lymphatic nodes. And then this is where the immune system breaks them down. Once it's finished, it pushes it into the bloodstream to be cleared. But the problem we've got now is that, you know, you're telling people to be sedentary. Yep. You're telling people to self-isolate and no one's being told to move their body, to exercise, to, nourish themselves, because obviously there's foods that will clog up the lymphatic system, all this kind of stuff as well. So these are the major differences and issues that I'm seeing at the moment.
Okay, and what will people be experience? Because obviously a lot of people haven't got this yet, or they're not quite aware of the symptoms. So what will a lot of people be experiencing or feeling, and what will they go through? Because I know it's obviously it's going to impact people's lungs, so it's going to impact their breathing. And what the impacts it'll have, and what will they be experiencing on a day-to-day basis?
Well, if we look at the numbers at this moment in time to help try and take some fear away from it, like over 80%, the number's a little bit grey at this moment in time, because obviously not everyone's getting tested because people are staying at home and self-isolating, but like over 80%, 80 to 85% will have no symptoms, or absolutely minimal, if any. So they would be people that, you know, they may feel slightly off, but they're not going to have the bad coughs, they're not going to have the breathing issues, you know, the more severe associated issues that are a part of this strain of this virus, essentially. And then obviously as you go down the spectrum, you can get more and more severe. But these are going to be, you know, we're talking at 3 to 5% of people that are going to get severe. So like these people would be hospitalized, end up in ICU, if that makes sense. And so, you know, I was sharing the numbers the other day. You've got, you know, over 300,000 cases at this moment in time, which is honestly is nowhere near the number, because the way transmission works and the way everything's happening, we'll have a lot more. But because these people are asymptomatic, but also because they'll get mild symptoms, they won't go to hospitals, right? So the cases will be much higher. So this is what I said to people, is that, you know, the WHO, which in some ways is there for good information, but in some ways it's still scaring people, because they're still quoting, you know, death rates at 3.5% or whatever it might be, which compared to a flu, a seasonal flu, is 0.1%. But if you start breaking it down into countries and the different peak levels, you're already seeing this number much nearer 1%. And this is what people need to take away, because, you know, the media is there for a reason, right? And that's to sell advertising, to have viewership and all this kind of stuff. So, you know, they're not really invested in good news. And that sadly is the biggest issue that I'm seeing, is that there's still a lot of misinformation in the media. And then on the flip side, you know, on social media, there's everyone who thinks they've become an immunologist overnight, and, you know, they have, you know, all these answers for it, but, you know, it's well intentioned, but it's not really the best info either. But, you know, from people experiencing nothing, Yep, I'm good. I think someone just tried to ring me. So from people experiencing nothing or no symptoms to obviously where they get a lot more extreme, where they get breathing difficulties, these are people who absolutely have to ring, you know, the helpline or get themselves to hospital, whatever it might be.
And what are the steps then? Because obviously you've seen people sharing it all over social media. These are the supplements that you need to take for your immune system. This is going to boost and enhance your immune system, like it's everywhere. But what are the steps that we can do to actually help our immune system, or what are the steps that we can help to actually support and help our gut? What are the things that you're doing for yourself and you're practicing, and what are the things that you're recommending for your clients right now? Start with that.
Okay. So if we think of like proven things for immunity, right? So take this with a pinch of salt, because if you're not doing this already and you haven't been doing it for 4 weeks, it's not going to protect you now, if that makes sense. So because there's a certain saturation level in the body. So if you think about it, vitamin C, everyone would have probably heard about. Zinc, most people have heard about, because pretty much every enzymatic reaction in the body works on zinc. And then something that has been shown to stop proliferation of viruses is elderberry. And so these are things, obviously vitamin D, part of the immune system, getting good sunlight, all this stuff should be our natural day-to-day stuff. But probably one of the primary regulators of your immune system at this moment in time that you could do on a day-to-day basis that will make a difference is your circadian rhythm. Like literally, if you want to have a powerful immune system, your circadian rhythm, which is essentially like, think of a biological clock for every cell in your body. It's the thing that turns on hormones. It's the thing that turns off hormones. It's what creates immune cells, clears immune cells, all this kind of stuff. So your circadian rhythm is regulated by what we eat, when we eat, cold, light exposure, warmth, all of these kind of things. And so what we want to do with people is now specifically, because if they're going to be spending more time at home or self-isolating, is be very strict on our getting up times, going to bed times, because the quality and quantity of sleep is going to be more vital for someone now than probably most things we can do, you know, secondary to diet, really, if that makes sense.
Okay,
So
cool. So let's say someone's they've got a really good sleep routine now. They've really worked on their sleep pattern. They're getting up at the same time. They're going to bed at the same time. What are the things that can actually help them in between all that or before that to actually help them sleep deeper and to sleep more quality? What are the things that they should be focusing on that's really going to help them?
Yeah. So if you think about it, the way our body works, we should be more active towards the early part of the day and more chilled out towards the evening.
Yeah.
And so in the mornings, if people, it depends on, it's their choice, right? But if people like cold exposure or light exposure, like doing that first thing in the morning, and depending on someone's physiological state, like I test whether people can process their stress properly. So if someone is, you know, if their type is that they're more likely to go to bed quite wired, quite switched on, and quite like maybe they fall asleep but they wake up in the night, like these people are not burning off adrenaline, cortisol, noradrenaline, so all stress neurotransmitters and hormones. So getting them to exercise earlier in the day is going to be much more beneficial for their circadian rhythm, if that makes sense.
Got it, yeah.
So like, but if you've got someone who metabolizes stress completely fine, then maybe that earlier evening routine would work good for them. So I always base it on the result of what their quality of sleep is like. So, you know, getting good exposure in the morning, like I'm not a huge fasting component as in multi-day or anything like this, but a lot of people nowadays, you can regulate your circadian rhythm by time restricted eating. So like, for instance, probably one of the most basic things I try and do with my clients to have stable blood sugars is from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. is just do your best not to consume anything. Because the clock's basically ticking when you've not got food being processed. So that would help regulate the clock. So making sure there's maybe a bit of time restricted eating in there if it's good for their physiology, because it's not good for everybody. Some people need a little snack before bed to help them sleep. But you know, if they can have that period and it works well, good. It might take a week or so to turn over to change, but it is a useful thing. Getting light exposure, cold exposure, you know, these things in the morning, probably be more active during the day. And then the usual things that you guys would speak about anyway, pre-bed, hour before bed, blue light taken away, no emails, phones, TV, and especially now because it's so easy because people are just going to be binging on Netflix and Prime and all this kind of stuff, like, and get all gadgets out of the bedroom, like as much as possible, any kind of light, even the, you know, they did a study, even on the standby light on the TV, causing disturbances in people's sleep.
Wow. It's crazy. And I think this is going to be a massive challenge, especially as looks like we're going to obviously end up in a lot more of in isolation. And it's, what can we actually do to help even more with our mental health and with our well-being? Because I feel like a lot of people are going to easily slip into a lot of junk patterns or a lot of junk values. And it's so much easier to consume that chocolate or that cake or eat those extra things now. And that's going to have it, like what you were just saying there, that's going to have a massive impact on your blood sugar levels. Therefore, going to have a massive impact on your sleep, on your information. So what have you recommended any set routines for your clients or anything that they need to focus on, like a practical sense on a daily basis to really help them with their mental health and their well-being? And is there anything that you'd say to people that when we're going in this isolation, these are a few things that you need to do every day to help you?
So I'll answer it from a physiological point first of why people do it, and then they might be able to understand why they're making the choices, and then I'll give you what we've done with our guys. So if you think about it, what we have in our brain is a dopamine reward system. Okay. So if you think about how that works, it works by trigger. So something happens and then behavior and then reward. Okay. So what happens from here is the trigger is for a lot of people when they're going to be at home, they're going to feel unsettled. So that unsettled feeling doesn't feel good, doesn't lift us up, doesn't make us feel certain. And we as humans want certainty. So what happens? your contextual brain, the right-hand side of your brain goes, well, hang on a minute. Where have you felt like this before? This is where we get recall of negative thoughts, memories. And then what can we do? What did we do to feel better? This is why people go for food.
Yeah.
And this is why people go for Netflix binges or whatever it might be, because if you pick sugary things, you're going to hit dopamine response. So you're going to lift your mood even temporarily. So the trigger is, I don't feel good. So I feel unsettled. I don't feel good. The behavior is eat.
Yeah.
The reward is escape that feeling short term.
Yeah.
And so we make people aware of that, so that when, for instance, they go to take the behavior, they can, I just say to them, before you eat the thing, I'm not saying don't eat it ever, but what I'm saying is before you eat the thing, whether it's the chocolate or drink the beer or, you know, have that extra glass of wine you said you wasn't going to have, just notice what you're feeling. Like what's occurring around you. Do you feel pressured by friends? Do you feel pressured by your financial situation? What do you feel pressured by? And then look at how that's fueling your behavior. And then what's the underlying reward of that is, you know, this situation's terrible. Maybe we can all connect on an unconscious level about moaning about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So awareness is the first step to actually. So I mean, what are a few ways that you become awareness? Is it just sitting with your thoughts? Is it by journaling? Is it just by taking a note mentally of what's going on?
Yeah.
How do we gain awareness? Because it's one of those things where it's like, yes, I want to gain more awareness, but it's a thing that goes over the day. It's not just something that you want. Oh, I've done that at 10 o'clock this morning. That's it. I've done.
Wouldn't that be great, right?
That'd be great. How do you get awareness over a day and a week and a month? What's your steps?
The only way that I found useful, and like to give this perspective to the guys listening, I'm very analytical. I work in biochemistry and the depths of cells, the human body, and, you know, molecular reactions, all this kind of stuff that's going on in the body. So like, I like to be able to put things in a box. But the thing is with it, when you deal with the intangible, which is awareness really, then what we need to do is find something that feels like it works for us. Like that's the most important bit. Like I try and take the angle off it as much as possible that it has to look a certain way. But I think the easiest way to become aware of what you're really feeling and what's going on in your life is literally take 10 seconds. It won't take any longer than that to pay attention to the speed of your thoughts.
Okay.
That's literally it. Because if we're sitting there and all of a sudden we're just constantly lost in thought and it's coming at 1,000,000 miles an hour, like we are not at any point settled. We're not content. We're not able to make good decisions. Everything will be reactive.
Yeah.
And so for me, like when I notice like I'm rushing or I'm doing things that at a quicker pace than I really need to, I'll just sit for a minute and I'll be like, okay, all I'll do is just sit there. You don't need to close your eyes. Just pay attention to the speed of your thoughts. And the likelihood is they'll be going really quite quick. And the problem is that tells us you're in the sympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
And that's fight or flight. And the problem with too much fight or flight is that it will make you want to go faster because it's that life or death situation of the mind. But the inclination is to go faster. But actually, we always use the analogy of like, if you're walking through the woods and you've got a map and a compass, and all of a sudden you lose your bearings, you're going to feel this stress response come up. Feel your blood pressure go up, feel your heart rate go up, you feel panicky. But running faster at that situation isn't any good for you.
No.
So this is where we have to understand sometimes doing things counterintuitive is the thing that's going to help us.
Got it. I love that. I love that analogy as well.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so so we've talked about obviously what people are going to be experiencing on a day-to-day basis. What do you think really now we can actually focus on for our mind and well-being a lot more? Because obviously we can talk about obviously the coronavirus, we could talk about the impact that it's going to have on us as a person, but with our mind and our well-being, obviously, let's say a person's gained more awareness, but they're still feeling that anxiety, they don't know how to break it, they're still feeling that panic, they're still feeling that fear, that uncertainty, and they've gained awareness, but what is the next step to be able to overcome that? What are your methods that or what would you recommend for someone to actually overcome that?
Yeah. Well, we use the ARA method, right? Which is awareness, responsibility, action.
Yeah.
And so the reason people stay in panic, we feel, and this is what we've done over the last 11 years with people, is The reason people stay in panic is they go from awareness to action straight away.
Got it.
And so, like, for instance, to put it in practice, I'm aware that I'm overweight or I've let my body slip. Action is sign up for a coach or go on a diet. Do you see what I mean?
Yep.
But the responsibility bits, we go awareness, responsibility, personal responsibility, really, and then action is the bit of going, okay, where can I be responsible for my behaviors that have basically led me to these actions? So, like, if we're overweight or if we're stressed out, whatever it might be, how have we co-create the situation, which can be quite challenging in a time like this. If you've lost your job or whatever it might be, you know, like, these things can feel challenging to do, but you can only control the bits that you can control. Does that make sense? So, like, one of the reasons we see a lot of people stressed out, and I was just speaking to a guy about this on his podcast, is that people's expectations are not their own, and it causes them a lot of stress. So the only expectations you should have are based on what me and you agree verbally. And then the rest of it, you can't have an expectation of what the outcome is, because we can't control it. And because nothing's been agreed, we're not holding ourselves to anything. So then we've got this intangible what if. And that's where that just throws people's minds off into panic. So unless something is verbally agreed, then we can have an expectation. So if I say to Danny, you know, I'm going to turn up and be on your live stream, and I don't turn up, like, you have absolutely the right to be annoyed with me, you know, call me out or whatever it might be, because we've set that agreement together, right? But yet, for instance, if there was something completely different where we hadn't agreed on it and it was just very loose, none of us could be disappointed. Like, trying to hold on to that disappointment or frustration is pointless, because it was never clear. And that was what brings me round, is that the people that have the clearer goals, the people that have the clearer focus, and they have little steps that they can tick off each day, these will be the people that will get through this much easier. The people that are drifting without any real purpose, like, this is where it's going to be very challenging mentally, because this time, so many people, especially employed or business owners, they find their purpose in their routine of getting up, traveling to work, being at work for certain hours, and then leaving. Then all of a sudden that's ripped out from you because you've got to be at home and you don't have any of those boundaries anymore. Then what happens is people lose their purpose very quickly. And this is where mentally it becomes a real challenge.
So what are a few things that you would also put in then for emotional control? Because obviously, like you said right there, someone's going to, if they're used to getting up at 7 o'clock, they're used to going through this, doing the same thing, going to work 9 to 5, going to the gym, coming home. Now they've got nothing. Now they're waking up in that state of panic, fear, anxiety still. But then they can kind of do what they want. They've got no clear goal and focus. What would you do in that situation? What can that person really, really do to start off with, to give them a more emotional control, to give them a bit of momentum again? What would be the things that you look at?
Yeah. What I would try, and as much as possible, like, establish routine even within their time off. Because the thing is with it, we'll have a routine anyway, but the routine just might be very unconscious. Do you see what I mean? Like, wake up, you know, waste some time on Facebook, then have some breakfast. Like, if you Zoom someone out and you showed them it over a week, they'll have a routine. But it just might not be one that serves them. Does that make sense?
100%.
So, like, I would absolutely, like, make sure they establish a routine. I know you guys do so much around the journaling and clearing your mind and all of this kind of stuff. And this is really what's going to help people get through it. Like, if they have structure and they can focus on that structure on a daily basis, and then that's what's going to relieve them from having so much pressure on themselves. Because the facts of the matter is, there's only so much we can control. Do you see what I mean? Like, we've had many people that have had their businesses shut down, like, physically. So can they control that? No, but what we can do is pivot and move them to a place where they can control things. So you're seeing a lot of people in fitness, for instance, that have took their stuff online, and maybe they've been talking about it for 2 years. But all of a sudden the situation has forced them to do it. Do you see what I mean? So all of a sudden the choice has been taken away. So the thing is with it is that I think there's a blessing in all of the things that occur, you know, and, you know, not for everybody all the time, but I think if we can be the people that choose to be responsible for our routines, and we wake up and, you know, I don't necessarily do formal meditation all the time. Like, for me, what works really well for me is like 10 minutes in the morning where I will literally just pay attention to my breathing and my thoughts. That's it. I'm not trying to manipulate them. I'm not trying to, be all zen or anything like this. I know that if I don't start my day like that, I'm not the creator of my day. Like, I'm just how I am, almost like I'm a result of how I slept or what thoughts I woke up with or whatever it might be. And that will be my energy of the day. But if I can take 10 minutes just to sit and breathe and notice, whoa, like my head is really racing, then I can choose the next step. Okay, if my head's really racing, then I can break it down. Why would that be happening? And then all of a sudden you're becoming preventative rather than reactive, which when you're in stress and high panic, you're going to be reactive.
100%. And even like I said, we was having a little chat before this call, and I said, even me this morning, I got my journal out, and the reason that I journal as well is just going back to your methodologies. It gives me awareness. It gives me awareness of my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, what's actually in my head. And you can actually objectively look at it and then go, right, why has this got a hold on me? Why is this stopping me moving forward? And then, like you say, once you've got that, you've got a little bit more focus. You've got a little bit more clarity and direction. But if you go straight into the day, and right now, like you say, you're in this panic, you're in this uncertainty, you're in this fear, and you have no direction for the whole day, you can just easily slip into those junk patterns, junk values. And as you just explained, it's so easy then to go for that instant reward that's going to make you feel a little bit better. And that's going to come in foods. That's going to come in different things that aren't going to serve you, whether it's going to be Netflix or anything like that. So actually, maybe not that they've got to journal, or not that they've got to meditate, or not that they've got to exercise, but actually just be aware of the thoughts would be a great place to start for that person as part of a morning routine.
Yeah.
Is that what you think?
Well, I think the simplest way we can make it work is the most effective. Yeah. Because, like most people, unfortunately nowadays, like a lot of this stuff becomes too esoteric, and it becomes like, especially if you're dealing with guys, it's not blokey. Do you see what I mean? So it's like, it has a lot bigger walls to it. But the thing is with it is the way I describe it to people, I'm like, look, if you are not paying attention to your thoughts, you have no control over your life. That's not an if. Like, every guy listening to this, they can do a simple exercise. If they close their eyes and they literally take 2 seconds to try and consider what their next thought will be, not one of them can do it.
Yeah.
So the thing is, if you're not even choosing your thoughts, why would you wake up and respond immediately or react immediately to the thought you're having? Doesn't make sense. All that thought is being created from is your past, and then your fear of the future. So really our only job in that moment at the start is to pay attention to what the narrative of our thought is and the speed of it. Because if the narrative is negative and the speed is fast, you're going to be in panic for the day, and nothing would have happened, nothing to validate it. You just woke up that way. And so the thing is, that's why having these little stop gaps of just paying attention to our awareness can be so powerful for liberating people from their mind. Because, if you've had, and we all have, right, have had negative experiences when we're younger, we've had tough times in business, or we've been bullied, or whatever it might be, you've got a whole file collection in your head of, these negative experiences, and they're all governed by your nervous system, right? So, when you're feeling good, how many negative thoughts do you have? Oh, sorry about that.
It's all right.
Yeah. It's like, how many negative thoughts do you have? Well, you don't. But when you feel on edge, when you're, and probably one of the biggest things people want to consider at this moment in time is caffeine. It might seem unrelated, but honestly, caffeine, the more you have, the less content you'll feel, like guaranteed, because caffeine will stop adenosine, without going too deep, caffeine will stop adenosine binding to a receptor. And adenosine is what's going to break down dopamine and allow you to have adequate levels of serotonin. So serotonin is what will make you feel content.
Yeah.
So that's why so many business owners live on a knife edge, because they're constantly having stimulants. And because, I'm not saying don't have any caffeine, but if you're on 2, 3, I guarantee A, it's affecting quality of your sleep, but B, it's also affecting your ability to be calm
and rational.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Okay, so regarding caffeine then, would there be anything that you'd recommend, and obviously because it's easier said than done, actually trying to bring that down? If you're and you're having a shitload of caffeine and you rely on it, that's like your crutch, your anchor to get going in the day, to feel good. So what would be the steps then for someone to just bring that down a little bit to make them feel better?
Well, it has to be done progressively. Like, I'm not a nil by mouth kind of guy. It will be a car crash,
Mm.
especially in this time as well. So like for me, and this is personal experience, right? Because I love coffee. Like, I have it shipped from Spain every month. So the thing is with it is that I'm a big coffee person. So the thing is that you have to know how it affects you though. And you don't know that until you come off it properly. Because
100.
many of us have been drinking it for such a long time that
Yeah.
we've just it's kind of integrated with our system. And so, if someone's on 2, 3, 4 caffeinated drinks a day, I would start by just reducing it by 1 and reducing the 1. So I try and, if people are having caffeine, I try and get it in the middle of the day. So I try and get it away from first thing in the morning,
Okay. And why would
because
that be?
the reason is because you will end up with a bigger adenosine buildup that's not being used, and it will make our brain really foggy,
Got it. Okay.
and
Interesting.
it will not allow us to have clarity of mind. Like, the caffeine will lift us up because it will fire dopamine.
Yep.
But what's going to happen, it's not going to feel really focused.
Mm.
It's just going to feel like we're not dragging ourselves out of bed anymore. Does that
Yep.
make sense?
So,
But we'll feel foggy and just not switched on, not very sharp. So what I try and do with people is avoid it first couple of hours in the morning, and then after around 2 p.m. because the half-life with caffeine is somewhere between 5 to 7 hours, right? So even 5 to 7 hours after having a double espresso or a coffee or a Red Bull, whatever it might be, you've still got 50% of that caffeine in your bloodstream. And if you think about sleep, melatonin, which is what triggers the brain that we're going into a nighttime routine and sleep, happens 2, 3, 4 hours before we go to bed. So if you're having your last coffee at 4 or 5 o'clock, you've still got 50% of that caffeine in your system at 9 and 10, and caffeine will lift cortisol, stress hormone, and cortisol will block melatonin.
Got it. So you can see now why someone obviously drinking more caffeine, not having a stabilized blood sugar levels, why that's going to affect their sleep, why that's going to affect the performance, their energy. They're going to have more brain fog. They're going to have a lack of clarity. They're probably making poor decisions, and they're going to be a little bit more irrational as well, aren't they?
Well, because when they're in, the easiest way to talk about it, I don't want to go into the neurobiology too much, but if you think of the prefrontal cortex, that's all basically to do with decision making. So it's contextual. So it's like, oh, I have this fear. Oh no, hang on a minute. It's not as scary as I thought. Like, that part of our brain gives us context, but it also is responsible for fear. So our amygdala is responsible for triggering fear, right? So we know people who have bigger amygdalas have more fear in their life. We just know that.
Yeah.
But also it's responsible for short to long-term memory change. So if you're seeing people having issues with short-term memory, if you're seeing people that are in a position where they're very responsive, then what we know is they're too fight or flight dominant. They're too sympathetic dominant. And so what happens is that Millie's having a go at a pigeon. So what's happening is that they're turning off their prefrontal cortex because too much cortisol exposure. And then that will mean they drop to the automatic brain. And the automatic brain is everything you know. Yeah. And if you're into new habits, like what you're doing with your guys, they'll just forget them.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So let's say, right, somebody, I'm trying to think of an argument here. So, or how we can move this forward. So let's say, for example, someone has got an amazing sleep routine.
Yep.
Somebody's got a baseline or a good level of blood sugar levels between 5.5 to 6. Somebody is quite aware of their thoughts. They're doing good practices. They're eating well. They're stabilizing blood sugar levels throughout the day. They're doing a little bit of fasting. They're limiting the caffeine. What would be then for that person? What would be like a 1 or 2 little 1%ers that you think could really help them? Like, because obviously a lot of people are talking about different exposures of thermal stress. So whether it comes into like a cold shower, or whether it's going to be in a sauna, or whether it's going to be doing different forms of exercise, what would be the things that you look at for that person that's got everything, all the shit's on lock, everything's good? What would be the things then that can really help them take them up that extra 1, 2, 3% and protect their immune?
Honestly, the way I do it, like I did with you, is cell communication. Like it's not the easiest thing to talk about, but if you can ensure cell communication, like you can take people from 80 to 95% in a short time. But in order to do that, we have to understand what's getting in the way, because even though people are nailing all these things, they still can have underlying infections. They can have inflammatory signaling at a cell level that they don't even know about. And it's not because You know, and the reason I would know these things with people is maybe they have skin issues, or maybe they get periodic headaches like quite a lot and they don't know why they get them, or maybe they get like these little symptoms that they've kind of just normalized in their life, like especially skin issues, like super normal for people nowadays to have like psoriasis or stuff like this. But for me, I know there's something going on there inflammatory wise, the way the signaling's working. So, you know, one of the simplest things that will give you a big jump is changing your trace mineral status. Like that's probably one of the biggest things outside of exercise and all that kind of stuff. So if you think of, most of us would just drink tap water, like just from the tap. You know, tap water is terrible anyway, won't get into that, but it's just poor quality. And then some people will filter it, which is awesome because you'll get rid of some of the nasties, but most filters are not very good. But you'll get rid of some of the nasties. But you also, when you filter stuff, you take out a lot of the minerals if there was much left in there anyway. So as long as you don't have kidney issues, that's the, you know, the contraindication to that. As long as you don't have kidney issues, then adding a good quality electrolyte formula, for instance, or even just a cheaper version of that with like pink Himalayan salt, like a tiny pinch to each liter of water. Like if you could do that, you'll change your hydration status by 40-50% compared to tap water. Like that's what we've seen in the studies. Yeah, so you could drink 40-50% less water when it's got a good mineral status, because that's what every cell in your body works on, a sodium potassium pump. Well, not every cell, but pretty much all of them. And if you don't have the minerals in your water, it will just flush through you. That's why when people up their water, they just seem to go for a wee all the time, because the mineral status is not being upped at the same time. And if you can hydrate someone's cell, then man, you're gonna help a lot.
Okay, so hydration is number one then, really, that we'd say right now for everyone to focus on is get a good quality electrolyte, making sure we're adding that to water. Is there, because obviously, like I said, we briefly touched on this at the start, but obviously there's a big play. I've seen a lot of coaches posting about like the thing that everyone needs to get right now is a probiotic. Right, the thing that they need to get right now is a digestive enzyme. Now, I understand totally, obviously, where they're coming from, and even I put a post out about what my supplementation protocol was, but obviously some people can misconstrue that as, oh, I need to get every one of those things. But what is, obviously, why does the gut play such, just for people that don't know too much about the gut, why does the gut play such a big role here? And does everyone need a probiotic? Is that something that you would recommend if someone's so set on getting a supplement right now? You want to cover all boxes. Is that what you would recommend?
The thing is with it is the reason the gut is such a potent part of discussion, well, within certain circles, is purely because 70% of your immune system is in or around the gut. So you have GALT. So we talked about malt earlier, but we have GALT in the gut, which is gut-associated lymphoid tissue.
GALT and
malt. So
important.
Right. And so this basically is your first line of defense. So the reason we have so much of the immune system within the gut is because it's like it's our protective mechanism, because when food is in our digestive system, it's still technically outside of the body. So the body, not everything can get into the bloodstream, right? Not everything can access cells. It would be disastrous for us. So the thing is with it is that we have to have a huge amount of the immune cells around the gut to protect us. So the reason people are saying that probiotics and all this kind of stuff is such an important thing is because of, trying to crowd out bad bacteria and give good bacteria. So I'm not against probiotics, but I think what we're missing nowadays is the deeper discussion about this is the diversity of the microbiome. So diversity of the amount of bacteria that you've got is much more important than the total number. Because the total number is very transient. So like, for instance, when you've got someone on a probiotic and you do stool tests with them, you'll see the increase. But then if you take them off the probiotic and then you do the stool test a couple of weeks later, the numbers have normalized again. So what they're saying is the probiotics we're putting in are not colonizing within the gut. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%, yeah.
So what I'm more of a fan of is trying to build up the health of the large intestine as much as possible anyway. So if you think about short chain fatty acids like butyrate or fibers that people can tolerate, these are all going to program the microbiome for diversity better than, for instance, if you just chuck in a probiotic. So that would be like, I always put it like throwing a probiotic in now is a bit like being on a boat that's taken on lots of water, and you've got this tiny little cup and you're like trying to throw it out the side, if that makes sense. Like it's well intentioned, but the overall impact of it compared to doing the bigger behaviors, like looking at your circadian rhythm, making sure you're getting the right dietary things in place, reducing refined processed foods out of your diet, reducing alcohol, them things are going to have a much bigger, profound effect on the microbiome and bacteria as a result than a probiotic ever would.
So as everyone is strolling through Morrison's now at toilet roll and every chocolate, every bread, actually what they should be looking for is those vegetables, those fruits, getting themselves a really good quality electrolyte and making sure the hydration levels are up, and also making sure that they're getting enough fiber in and they're getting enough quality veg in, because those aisles are going to be free right now. There's not going to be too much.
Honestly, I was in Waitrose the other day, like full of vegetables, just no meat. That was pretty much it. And the one thing I always explain to people is there is a process deep in our body, 85% of it happens in our liver, called methylation. And so if you think about that, that is responsible for transcribing our DNA and to repairing DNA. So when we get damaged cells, so like what would be caused by a virus, we have to have methylation work properly. And methylation is pretty much governed by all the B vitamins. So like one of the simplest things people can do without going to buy a supplement is just eat more green, leafy, dark green leafy veg. Because it's packed with things like folate and B9, B6, B3, all these kind of things. And they fuel all of these, lower mechanisms in the body for people. And I always say to people, and people don't realize this, I ask them, I'm like, oh, if you eat a salad, do you feel better? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, if you eat a leafy salad, how do you feel? Do you feel lifted up? And the people that have methylation issues, every single time they feel better.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So I'm going to wrap this up now, Cliff, but I want to know, what are you focusing on over the next 2 weeks? How are you using this time not to be reactive and be more productive? What are the routines or the practices or the exercise and what are you putting in place to really help you through this time of isolation and to make you come out the other side ahead of everyone else and feel really good? What are the things that you're doing?
Well, I suppose the number one thing for me is self-care to start with. I think more important than any time right now is self-care. So like I've had 2 interviews this morning already, right? Because we're getting asked a lot to share kind of stuff with people. But, the first thing I did when I wake up is look after myself, have some breakfast. I have a tea first thing in the morning, like a herbal tea or something like this. And I only drink decaf coffee now anyway. Well, a good decaf coffee anyway. And so, the thing is I make sure I do those things first. I did 10 minutes worth of mindfulness, just paying attention to my thoughts, making sure that I'm in the right mental place to come and serve. Because like, if I come on here and I'm all jittery and all over the place, like I can't serve you properly, right? And I can't help these guys. So it doesn't make any sense. So, that level of self-care has to be hyper now compared to what it's been before. So that'll be the things that I focus on, would be the self-care thing. And then, from what we're doing at the moment, a lot of it is just service-based, just sharing information, trying to get better quality information out there, and just allowing people to kind of bring down the panic. Because the reality is that, if you spend all your time on social media or the news, like you're just going to be petrified for the next however long it goes on for, right? But if you just choose to listen to better quality information and drop our expectation, right? Because if you've got an expectation that you can go to the pub next week, you're going to be disappointed. It's not going to happen. Do you see what I mean? But if we can make expectations between our partners and our children and ourselves, and we can uphold those commitments and say, look, I'll do this for you. Can we do this together? Can we do this with the kids to ensure they're doing what they need and what they need? If we can uphold those expectations, everyone will feel much better. But if we try and uphold the expectations about when we can get back to the old way of doing things, there's going to be a lot of very unhappy people.
Well, where can everybody find you, Cliff? Where can everybody, if they want to know more about what you do, how they can actually get your help, how do they reach out to you?
The easiest thing, our Facebook community is the ARA method by Cliff and Marta. That's a Facebook group, just a free community. We've put 5 hours worth of live streams in there in the last week, I've done a whole 90-minute training on the virus. That's completely free for anyone that's in there. And then cliffandmartyr.com. That's the easiest way, really.
Awesome. Well, thanks for spending a good 45 minutes with me answering a lot of questions. I'm sure obviously my community and everyone else can have a lot more questions, and maybe we'll get you on in the future time. But thanks for helping us out, and yeah, have a great day, Cliff.
Thanks, buddy.